pleasure to welcome you all today, and particularly to welcome such a distinguished panel of experts to consider the practical impact of women, peace and security agenda for women and girls in the broader Arab region as we approach the 20th anniversary of UN Security Council Resolution 1325. It's a great shame that we are all not together in person to mark the occasion. Women's movements across the world had very different plans for 2020, not only for 1325, but for 25 years since the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, 10 years since the establishment of UN Women, 5 years of the Sustainable Development Goals. All the carefully made plans have been laid to waste by the latest crisis. To be honest, I don't think any of us truly felt like this anniversary was something to celebrate. Rather, it was an opportunity to recognize what progress there has been and assess the shortcomings and look at the reality. So what difference has 1325 made over the last 20 years for women and girls? If we were to spend our time today saying out loud the names of every woman who has been killed in conflict, who has been raped in conflict, who has lost their family, their homes, become displaced, lost her livelihood through conflict since October 2000, I think we might be finished in another 20 years or even 40 years. But if we wanted to name every woman who has been part of peace process in the last 20 years, maybe we would be done in 2 minutes. How long would it take us to name every person held accountable for the use of sexual violence in war, every person persecuted for crimes of aggression, crimes against humanity, war crimes? There are the cold realities we must deal with. Since 2000, nowhere else in the world has experienced the extraordinary level of conflict seen in the Arab region. Invasion, civil wars, occupation, militias, insurgency, and the capture of a whole population by extremists. It is absolutely vital that women in this region tell the true story of what has happened to women and girls affected by the conflict. So I'm delighted that we have a truly outstanding panel to consider 1325 and its impact today. Leading the conversation, it will be my pleasure to welcome Dr. Maya Morsy, President of Egypt's National Council for Women, who I always say the de facto minister. While she has an incredible experience with the women's movement, and in particular, Karama. While at the UNDP, Dr. Maya was pivotal in the establishment of the Arab regional network for women, peace and security. And she has done so outstanding work for the women in the region. I remember one time we were at the Arab Women's Organization with Dr. Merfat Kalawi, who wanted to do 1325, and she said, I need experts. And we were in the room with her and we said, well, unfortunately, you're looking at them. So from that moment on, Maya has really been a pioneer and a champion for 1325. I know that because I worked with her very closely in different capacities. And it's wonderful to have her right there working in a government, because it's always important for women. This is, 1325 has to have civil society and, and officials and governments working together to implement the national action plans. And I think it's not an accident that Egypt has actually adopted the national action plans. And of course, Maya would tell us about that. So I'm very happy, Maya, that you are joining us, and that I have absolutely, forced her hand, of course, to be the one that's going to be blamed for giving less time for people to speak. So she's going to take the blame today. Despite, as I noted, the extraordinary levels of conflict we see in the region, few countries have national action plans for the implementation of 1325. So it is a great pleasure to welcome a number of women who have played a key role in the development and oversight of some of those national action plans. We are joined from Iraq by the incredible Suzan Aref, founder and director of the Women Empowerment Organization and co-coordinator of the cross-sectoral task force for Iraq National Action Plan. The story of Iraq over the last 20 years is really the story of the region, of the whole world. Despite the extraordinary suffering, no one has done more to reach across communities and take truly national perspective of Iraq's national action plans than Suzan Aref. It's a great, great, great pleasure for me and for all of us to have her today be part of this incredible panel. Jordan launched its first national action plan in 2018, thanks in no small part to our next speaker, Dr. Salma Al-Nims, Secretary General of the Jordanian National Commission for Women's Affairs. Dr. Salma has done outstanding work nationally and internationally and for women, and it's our pleasure to welcome Salma. The women's movements in Palestine were absolutely central to the development and adoption of the first national action plans in 2017. So we are delighted to welcome Randa Siniora, General Director of the Women's Center for Legal Aid and Counseling, to discuss the Palestinian National Action Plan. Participation is, of course, one of the 4 pillars of 1325, and it was Randa who in 2018 became the very first Palestinian woman to address the United Nations Security Council during the debate on women, peace, and security. The transition in Sudan, and I must say, I'm not sure if Samia ElHashmi is in, but you know, there are a lot of problems with the internet in Sudan, so hopefully she will join us. The transition in Sudan has been the opportunity seized by the activists to put 1325 on the transitional government's agenda. Sudan will finally have a national action plan, thanks to the work of incredible women like our next speaker, Samia ElHashmi. Samia ElHashmi has been a key member of the task force of the engagement for women in Sudan and South Sudan, and we're delighted to have that she will join us today. This year sees big global anniversaries, but no bigger than the organization led by our next speaker, the Arab Women's Organization of Jordan, celebrates its 50th, birthday this year. A truly remarkable achievement, especially for a leader, for the leadership of Layla Naffa. Welcome, Layla, and I must say, Layla is our guru, and at our heart. So, Layla, congratulations for the 50 years of insisting on women's rights. Amal Kreishe leads the Palestinian Working Women Society for Development. It has been through the strength of Palestinian civil society and truly incredible women like Amal that women, peace, and security has been put on the agenda in Palestine. And they have been successful at it, I must say, the most successful actually in the region, with Jordan, of course. And we're very grateful to Amal for joining us. Countries with established national action plans are in the minority in the Arab region, and many of the countries that need them most do not have them. We are delighted to be joined by 3 speakers from countries that continue to see the most appalling violence and conflict. From Libya, the wonderful and incredible Zahra Langhi, co-founder of the Libyan Women's Platform for Peace. Zahra is a brilliant activist whose recent work has included looking at the impact of local women-led mediation in Libya. Dr. Mouna Ghanem has done vital work for women in the region, and she is someone who really has a lot of history with UNFPA and UNIFEM, and is a powerful voice for peace and justice in Syria, for those of you who know her. And we are very, very delighted and thrilled that she has joined us. Amal Bahsa is an incomparable voice for human rights. The Yemeni coalition just launched an incredible report yesterday for 60 women who came from different backgrounds and different cities and villages and all kinds. Of course, the men will never be able to come together and put their differences aside to come to unify their vision for rights. So congratulations, Amal and her team, for putting an incredible report. From serving on the National Dialogue Committee as a spokesperson to this week launching the Shadow Report for Yemen with over 60 Yemeni civil society groups, Amal is an essential figure in the region. When we think of women, peace, and security and the international community, we can only think of the northern countries or the Scandinavian countries. So we are delighted to welcome today representatives from Sweden and Norway with outstanding experience in the Arab region, both diplomatically and militarily. And I must say, Norway has been a country that Karama in particular has been working very closely together. And what we love about them is they never had their own hidden agenda. They let us do what we know best to build on what the women are already doing in the region. Ambassador Charlotta, so we're very happy to have both of you. Ambassador Charlotta currently serves as the director of the Swedish Dialogue Institute for the Middle East, having served as her country's ambassador to both Jordan and Egypt. That's why we think she's one of us always. Lieutenant General Robert Mood, I don't know how many times I have ever said General or Lieutenant, both, so I'm very happy. This is going to be, the few times, but we have invited General Robert Mood because of what he has done and how he has contributed to engendering everywhere he was and making sure that women played an important role. So Lieutenant General Robert Mood currently serves as the president of the Norwegian Red Cross, having retired from the military career that saw him serve as chief commander of the Norwegian Army, head of the United Nations Observatory in the Middle East, and Norway's military representative at NATO headquarters in Brussels. Finally, so welcome, General Robert Mood. Finally, our respondent today will be the wonderful Dr. Toni Haastrup, senior lecturer in the international politics at the University of Stirling. Dr. Toni has written extensively on women, peace and security, global governance and security through feminist lens. We are delighted to have her and look forward to her candid discussions today. Welcome to all our panelists. Welcome to our audience. Now it's my duty to hand over to our moderator before we start the first discussion of the event on national action plans. It's very important to us that women from the region have a platform to discuss the experience of 1325. When we look at which countries launched the first national action plans, which have had the most plans, which are the countries that talk about feminist foreign policy, it is the countries in the global north. We need to understand what impact it has had that in practice, women, peace and security has been so dominated by the global north. Has 1325 become a people's agenda, or is it simply a foreign policy that has been done by the north in the south? This is very important because I think for years we have been coming together and talking about 1325 and celebrating something which we have absolutely no clue exactly what we are celebrating. I think what the platform of celebrations has really provided us was to be together and to have at least 1325, as an agenda for discussion. I think many of you are wondering why I went through everybody's resume. I think it's extremely important because part of it, the major part of it, is celebrating these incredible women and what they have done and recognizing them. And really, this is so important. In the Palestinian issue, we are going to have Lamis. Lamis is from Muftah. Muftah is a very powerful, Hanan Ashrawi formed it, and she's the head of Muftah. Hanan, who has done incredible work and one of the first, women who actually got, involved in women's issues. I think as a young person, believe me, once upon a time I was young, it was wonderful to see this woman on Nightline in Washington, D.C. and watch her, how she handled herself, ask her questions. I must say she has been my inspiration from that moment on. So Lamis will be talking about policies and how this incredible Palestinian women have all come together, and she will be gluing all that work together. So I want everybody welcome, and I'm celebrating all and each of you today. We all are. And thank you so much for giving us your precious time. And now my friend Maya Morsy is the one who is going to be blamed if there is absolutely no time for anybody. Maya has been a friend, and she has been a pioneer, and she has been absolutely the heart and mind of women, peace and security. And in her own diplomatic way, she's more diplomatic than I am, has been really pushing this agenda. And I must congratulate you and Egypt for adopting it. And we look forward to talking to you, Mamiya, and thank you so much for taking time today. Thank you.
Thank you, my dear friend Hibaaq. I hope my voice is clear, loud and clear.
Yes, it is.
Excellent. It's a real pleasure to be with you, Hibaaq. You know how much Karama meant to me. For me, it's not an NGO or a civil society organization. For me, Karama is a belief in women's issues. And you are my friend, yes, but this organization as a whole, with all our friends around the table, are believers in what they are doing. The passion is clear, the persistence is clear, and I'm seeing you the same person throughout the 10 years that we know each other. No change. And this is why this organization has a true sense of real work for women on the ground. I'm really happy to be with all my friends and from the Arab region, and I'm also very much happy to see Charlotta on the other side, shining, and looking forward to have more work with you, Charlotta. Let me start. I will not introduce the team, the presenters again, but I want to tell you some of my personal thoughts before we start. And because I've been there since the drafting of the 1325, and things have been moving. And when I read the 1325 right now, I'm seeing the 3 Ps again. We're keeping on talking about the protection, the prevention, participation, and then reconstruction. But the 3 main things, that the protection, participation, and prevention, are the core of the women's movement at large. Not only the 1325, what we're celebrating right now, 20 years, and we're still talking about the 3 Ps. The world has changed, for us at least, a lot. We're seeing extremism, terrorism, recurrent armed conflict, increased number of refugees all over, internally displaced persons, climate change, and I'm telling you that climate change is becoming part and parcel of this agenda as well, and the global nature of health and pandemics, and welcome COVID right now, and we're talking about peace and security, and you're having pandemics all over again. So imagine the situation of women if they are in conflict with this. So what we are calling for is inclusive peace efforts with the full participation of women, and it's not an option anymore. I'm not seeing it an option or is something that we have to convince or to be convinced. It is NSC. And I said yesterday, I keep on repeating my, do you hear me? Yeah, I keep on repeating my dear friends, Hibaaq, women should not be a cloth on the table. We should be real participant in the peace negotiation and the development negotiation and any decision making that is in the country. What is the impact? Is it positive? Is it the positive impact on creating more inclusive policies in having women on representation? When we're discussing this, we're seeing that there is 35% likelihood of peace deals that would last for more than 15 years. But is it only because having one woman, or because the community themselves believe that women participation would lead to inclusive peace and sustainable peace at large? So if this is recognized worldwide with the 1325, still the global representation is minimal. Still, we don't see women heading the United Nations. Remember, there were 9 women running for elections. And when the countries were voting, they voted for men. So even on this level, the organization working on peace and security, working on the development agenda, it was, I just heard that it's not becoming a glass ceiling, it's becoming an iron ceiling in this level. But I think as women, all together, we can melt this iron as well. We are not going to accept having an iron ceiling on the top of our head. For Egypt, thanks Hibaaq for mentioning that the 1325 action plan is on process, and we are working on it heavily at this stage, because we have 2 statements announced by the Egyptian women 2017, and you're going to receive also 2020. Egyptian women are talking about peace and security and the demands all over. But what breaks this or break our glass ceiling were the first appointment of the advisor to the present advisor to the president on the national security. And at this moment, when we saw Faiza Abu Naga announced as the advisor on national security, this is where I had a hope that this agenda would be opened and would be opened broadly as well. So we are working right now on the agenda, and we are part of the FemWise Africa, the Mediterranean Women Mediators Network, and the Arab Women's Network as well as mediators. On the decision-making level, Egypt has 25% of women in the cabinet and 25% in the parliament, and expected to have also around 15% in the lower house. What do I mean by meaningful participation? The International Peace Institute has laid out 7 distinct models of inclusion. And I told you yesterday, Hibaaq, it would be very good if we come out with some concrete results of our meeting. So do we mean the models of inclusion includes what? Is it a direct participation at the negotiation table? So to what extent we are helping women to reach this? Or observers, you're hearing me? I think someone is having their, okay, Samia closed her phone. So is it a direct participation at the negotiation table? So what is our strategy for this? Or observer status, or the inclusive commission in the respective countries? The high-level problem solving, Hibaaq, and you were one of the best, actually the best organization that had done this. I saw you in Libya, I saw you in Yemen, I saw you in Sudan, and working on this. Or it's a public decision-making process. So you need to have an ideational change campaign so the community themselves accept to have more women representing them. Is it a mass action? So we need to also have a close collaboration among countries to put this agenda highly, especially in our region. So I see the way forward is very much something that we should focus as feminists, as civil society, as government, as respective countries who are in conflict at this situation. But we have to make sure that women are around the table. It's not tokenism, and we are not a tablecloth. So I will move now to our speakers, and I will keep my way forward suggestion to the end. So right now we're moving to the regional national action plans, and I will give the floor to my friend Suzan Aref.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Maya. Thank you, Hibaaq. The development of the first national action plan in Iraq. So I have to say that the civil society and women organization had proceeded the adoption of the first national action plan in Iraq, as they have realized the importance of the resolution 1325 as an important tool to guarantee women's rights. So by how to translate the content of this resolution on the local ground by law legislation. So this is how we came to agreement, how it's important to put our vision and strategy to support the development of the national action plan. So this is how the civil society, like 10 organizations, work together, and this is how the civil society gained a great success with creating the political will, and also of state actors working with both government, the Iraq federal government and Kurdistan, even with in very critical situation, and with creating this partnership of civil society, and this all lead to establish a special cross-sector task force for the developing of this national action plan. So this is how we gain a very great achievement, but the first challenges that we faced, it was after the adoption, as the government, they deleted the budget. So there was no resources, no allocated resource for the plan. But again, the civil society try to find other alternatives. So this is how they came together again and working with the cross-sector task force, like to develop an emergency plan to respond to all women affected by the conflict of ISIS intervention in Iraq. So this is through the emergency plan and through the master plan, we're able also to allocate some fund from international community, UN agency, and civil society local organization. So this is how it was about the process of the first National Action Plan. But of course, there's a lesson learned from that process. So the lesson learned, it is that the National Action Plan stays meaningless without resource like budget and also the capacity, institution capacity to implement this plan. And of course, it is very important the involvement and sustainable involvement of the civil society organization in all the stages, like development, implementation, and monitoring. Sorry, I have some, yeah. And also the coordination among the actors working on the implementation of National Action Plan or supporting it. The international community, they have to support and especially to push, to use their political will, and also how to maintain the civil society participation. So I can say through all the years now, unfortunately, we are in Iraq going backward, working on women, peace, security agenda, on the second National Action Plan. Since 2018, the efforts start to work on developing the second National Action Plan, but till now we are on the end of 2020, but till now we don't have the second National Action Plan. And this is all it is I have to say, because there's no clear mechanism, there's no clear machinery for women machinery that working on this. So there's a duplication of work, or because they are only not functioning well, or it is only decoration. And even there is a big, huge criticism on the draft National Action Plan now, because it means there is some kind how sometimes the international community, I have to say, they are going more looking for government interest, not to putting any commitment, trying to not making too much programs that responding to women, especially when it comes to legal issues, laws that women need for protection, prevention, and also budgets for economic empowerment, recovery. So this is, it means that we want only to change interest, to make it easy, simple, that not need that budget, that not need that resource, so it will be easy to approval. And this is what happened also in the first time when the NAP, the National Action Plan, was a huge plan, but before approving it, they deleted the main pillars, the legislation, economic empowerment, resources, and then it came, the plan, it came meaningless, but we tried our best just to cope with it and to implement it. But now again, we are repeating the same. So how we can support, what is our recommendation, how we can support this and not to make it a very, again, something useless. It is only plan by name plan, but on the ground, women cannot because one of the lesson learned that how we have to localize the second nap. But again, now it is impossible that women can benefit from this plan. Again, if the plan, there's no budget for that plan. If the plan cannot respond to victims of the conflict, there's no, even the lack of the recovery pillar in the plan. So it means, again, it is a weak plan. In addition, that I said it needs the strong coordination among actors, and also, of course, need to support strength the role of civil society, because again, they are limiting the space for civil society with more control for the organization that involved in this. So I don't want to take more time, but I have to say that also the division among the civil society that working on women, peace, security. And this is also mostly, it came from the international community to create this division rather than how to unify the voice of civil society. Thank you very much. But I'm ready for
Thank you, Suzan. Thank you, Suzan, for the excellent presentation and all the points mentioned. I would like to alert the rest of the panelists that I will be raising this. I don't know whether it's clear that it's 1 minute left, but the mirror imaging. So I will be raising this before your last minute, so you can wrap up as beautiful as Suzan has done. Thank you very much for keeping the time as well, Suzan. The next panelist will be my dear friend, Salma Al-Nims, Jordan. The floor is to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maya, and I'm really honored to be on this panel led and coordinated by Karama, who has a really high prestige and impact in our region. And I'm really honored to be among all these amazing women and men who work in this field, and there's much to learn from all of them. I will try to be very concise. I will start by talking about the process of adopting a national action plan in Jordan, and maybe just highlight the positive areas, and then try to quickly move also to some challenges that we all know that we really need to continue to work on in order to have some achievements. Why I say that? Because this is not a simple process, and it has its challenges at global, regional, and national level. Now, for Jordan, we could say that the importance of our action plan, although we had a coalition since 2012, and we had some form of a strategy which was not endorsed by the government, because for the government, it was kind of very vague, and big, had everything under the moon. So it sounded like a national strategy for equality rather than 1325 without a logical framework. But also for us as a national machinery and for the civil society, there were many issues in 2014, 2015 that were important and needed to be adopted also and dealt with in a national action plan. For example, the fact that we had a huge influx of refugees into Jordan, which needed to be taken into consideration. This is not only a plan for women, Jordanian women, it's a plan for women in Jordan. And this is something that we hold strongly to. The issue of the role of women and local communities in the prevention of violent extremism. And in this aspect, we believe that this is not only about, and we're really holding very strongly in our work, this is not about what we call Islamic terrorism or the narrative and this discourse but it is all about any form of extremism that could lead to marginalization, attacking. Even now, we're talking about how the women movement is perceived and feeling endangered when they push the feminist agenda sometimes. So it's about diversity and acceptance, and not only about violent extremism as it is defined by the global media. And also, as I said, the importance of having a monitoring and evaluation framework. It's about implementation. It's not about having a very, a beautiful plan without implementation. So I would say through that experience, the importance of it is that the coalition included civil society organizations, the security sector, and the government, and it created a good level of dialogue. There was consultations in the process of developing it, and it was very important to us to develop a monitoring and evaluation framework for it, and we worked very hard on costing, and this is a very important lesson, costing the plan, getting the government to put commitments towards some contribution through their own programs under the specific ministries towards implementation of the plan, which showed political will from the government towards the donor community. And that's why we were able to mobilize a joint fund that was funded by 5 countries. I'm trying to mention them all now before I forget them all. Norway, Canada, Spain, UK, now I'm missing the third, the fifth, Finland. And actually we had, now our plan is funded fully, the first plan, which is very important. That doesn't mean, and I quickly move to the challenges and come back to important lessons. That doesn't mean that we do not have challenges. There are many challenges when it comes to implementation. Of course, we need to continue to ensure coordination. We need to ensure that we have the data in order to be able, because JNCW, and this is very important in Jordan, that at least there is a national organization that's leading, following on the implementation. But if there is no commitment to the availability of data, then it's very difficult to monitor implementation. Another issue is, although the civil society have risen to the occasion when during the COVID-19 situation, especially on the lockdowns, the role of women, despite we had the fact that we had this amazing plan, we have coalitions by the civil society that were working on the ground, mainly female-led civil society, but the formal structures did not recognize that. We were not in the committees that were planning the response. We sent our policy briefs as a national machinery, as civil society, but formally this was not there. So it was always like a response. They would respond to us sometimes, they will not respond. And we have to have these formal structures. How do we move from this how do we harness this knowledge and this capacity of the civil society and national machineries to become formalized within these structures is very important. We are working on that now as JNCW on mapping this, what the efforts of the civil society has been within that. And we want to make sure that in our next phase, I'm wrapping up, we will be looking at these lessons that we learned. In 2021, we will be embarking on another consultation, national-wide consultation, to prepare JONAP 2, and we're hoping that this will be very important to do that. We have to ask ourselves at the regional level some questions. This is not about women in positions. We need women who believe in the feminist agenda. We need women who believe in personal freedoms. We need women who believe on freedoms for society, for civil movements. We cannot be in high-level positions when in some countries however, we find that still personal freedoms are an issue. And this is something that we need to ensure that we are able to impact. And finally, at an Arab level, we need to keep pushing and questioning. If there is commitment to peace, we cannot be implementing 1325, asked to commit, and then we still have a major problem, which is the occupation. You cannot, people are questioning, why are you committed to this UNSCR resolution, but there are other resolutions that nobody cares that they're not implemented, and there are people who are still living under occupation in our region. This is something that affects our ability to push for this agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Salma. As passionate as usual, you have put everything in place. The third person, the panelist is Randa. Is Randa here?
Thank you, Maya, and thank you, Hibaaq and Karama. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and congratulations on our 20th anniversary. Despite everything, we women need to celebrate and build on our successes for the future. And therefore, even if we're not very happy with the process and with this, with the achievements, we have done a lot. We as Palestinian women, and as Salma has started made a very good, important introduction to me, Palestinian women were not really confident that this tool 1325 is very relevant to them because it excluded the occupation and because the components of the 3 Ps were given more weight compared with the issue of accountability. Living under occupation as civilian Palestinians and women and girls under occupation, our lives are very much impacted negatively by the Israeli violations and war crimes that are committed against the Palestinian people, especially the gendered impact, which makes it compounded and disproportionate as it affects women and girls in our own society. At first, we were hesitant, but we were also very happy when we were the second country after Iraq in 2017 to adopt our National Action Plan. Our plan was focused on 4 pillars. The 3 Ps, protection, prevention, and participation, but has given a very big weight to the issue of accountability. We wanted, we joined efforts, and we started even before the Palestinian National Authority coming up with the idea of having a higher national committee that includes both national official institutions, official duty bearers, and NGOs. We were preceding that, like usual, NGOs and civil society organizations as early as 2011 and 12 had a joint vision. When the Palestinian Authority wanted to have the higher national committee, which included both NGOs and official institutions, they have adopted in the first National Action Plan our approach in adopting that. And that's why in the results, it was like in the implementation, 52% of the implementation or more was in the first National Action Plan was the achievements made by the Palestinian NGOs, while the Palestinian Authority voluntarily adopting the NAP has not allocated the enough resources, has not invested in building the capacities and the competence of the official personnel in adopting, in implementing that, and heavily dependent on civil society organizations and women's organizations for the implementation of the first National Action Plan. Now we are in the second phase. We are in the second generation Women, Peace and Security. And we are joining efforts again with the Palestinian Higher National Committee, which includes everybody, including the security sector and the different ministries. But at the same time, under the auspices of the Palestinian Ministry of Women's Affairs. But despite that, we as Palestinian women think that what unites us is that we think that this tool should be perceived as one of many other tools in the context of international human rights and humanitarian law. It should not be excluded from other UN resolutions, and it should definitely give weight and find solutions on how we can really make the international community more accountable and bear their legal obligations under international law and humanitarian law, and really make Israel as an occupying authority accountable for the serious grave breaches of international humanitarian law and violations of human rights law. We think, I will wrap up, I think in the discussion, we have to highlight how could we in the region, in our MENA region, really try to capture and change the paradigm and the discourse in order to put our priorities, whether under occupation or in the conflict zones in our region, in a way where we can really change the rules of the game, where we take the lead as the peoples of the world and not really give the states just the discretion of coming to international forums and speaking about them adopting national action plans without allocating the budgets or the resources or taking into account the priorities of women and girls and the peoples in our region of what they want and what are their priorities. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Randa. Thank you, Habibti, for being so passionate. It's a pleasure always hearing you. The fourth panelist is Samia ElHashmi, Sudan.
The internet is a challenge in Sudan, so maybe
Can
we should go to the next speaker.
Next speaker is Layla Naffa. Once Samia is connected, Hibaaq, please inform me. I will get her to the round. Okay. Layla?
Again, I would like to pass my thanks to those who gave us this opportunity. It is not only to celebrate the 20th anniversary of 1325, but also to integrate our work and to have this, shall we say, reflection over what has been done and what we are looking for in the future. In my way of looking at things, I think I will talk about our story because Dr. Salma said that the civil society was from the very beginning, shall we say, struggling for having a national action plan, and this is true. Our organization was there from the very beginning, and we were pushing, and it was at the time of Salma's at the JNCW that we got it. But the trick that was used, and this is just things to clarify, Salma was very sure that the government of Jordan would endorse it if we have maintained the resources. And this is what she has done. And this is the Nordic countries, also with Spain. They supported the resources for the first 3 years. And this is what I would like also to say, the sustainability in the second phase should be maintained. I don't know how, but this is one of the things that we should care for, because the process is very good now. And what we do as civil societies on the ground is very much appreciated, because the government is not doing the first protection or prevention steps when women survivors reach the places to be served, especially from amongst the refugees. They just give us the shelters to keep these women. But all the psychological help and support and all the case management work is carried out by civil society and women NGOs in particular. The issue now is how to survive at the time when the international NGOs are leaving, or at the time when we speak of localization. Of course, other than these troubles, we have the trouble of COVID-19, and we had to go online, and the difficulties, and also during the lockdown, also women were not easily receiving any of the services, or they were cut. Anyway, all these difficulties are now in front of our eyes. But what we are keen on is that localization is not taking place. And this is, I would like to clarify that in the year 2016, a global summit was convened. And in the global summit, they said we should give, and this was a decision, 25% to the local NGOs in order to make the mission surviving. And at the end of the day, now we are in 2020, and nothing is materializing. So the localization, which means that the support will go directly to the local NGO, has not been achieved. Together with other prominent in their work NGOs, we need to work together, first of all, to let this decision materialize. And I think in such a case, we need, I will wrap up, we need to ask the help of the Nordic countries, because they were from the very beginning helping in having the national action plan, and also the unifying efforts inside Jordan, and also that the government should come again to support. The matter of resources is very important to carry on the things that we are doing these days, and the matter of having consultations and having work together is very important. This is not being carried out locally, but I mean with projects, the picture is now that there are many projects, and mostly supported by UN Women, but we don't feel that there is a unified movement by the civil society. And I close by that, having in mind that we should have it as a recommendation if this is possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Layla. I'll move now to Amal Kreishe. Amal, are you here?
Hello. مساء الخير.
مساء الفل.
Also I would like to express my appreciation to all the efforts of Karama to voice women messages concerning peace and human security. I remember in the beginning of 2012, we start in Karama to develop our strategy, to develop the whole agenda of women, peace and security in the midst of different type of conflicts that impacted negatively on the daily life of women in our region. So since I have 5 minutes, I try to, to meet, the standards of the discussion. The Women, Peace and Security agenda is of utmost relevance in the context of Palestine. Colonial violence, de facto and de jure apartheid, ongoing economic siege, and the violent deprivation of Palestinian lands and resources by Israeli forces have determined a worsening conflict situation in Palestine. That disproportionately affected Palestinian women and girls. The recent COVID-19 health crisis has been weaponized by Israeli forces to further violate Palestinian rights in the context of the pursuit of the so-called deal of century and the related plans of annexations of large and strategic lands of the Palestinian West Bank, almost 30% of West Bank, by the military occupation. Palestinian women and girls are subjected to intersecting oppressions because of their nationality and their gender. The plans of annexation include the unilateral deal of the century, if implemented, would exacerbate this situation further, marginalizing and disempowering Palestinian women. In this context, UN Security Resolution 1325 and the Women, Peace, Security Agenda are crucial legally binding instruments that can be used to expose the intersecting oppressions faced by Palestinian women and girls, to demand accountability to the international community, especially the United Nations, EU, and all international structures for the violation committed against them by the Israeli forces, to further the advancement of representative equality in decision-making positions, and to ensure human security services are in place for women in the Palestinian occupied territory and who face reality of military colonialism and social gender-based violence. First, 1325 demands the respect of other international law instruments that are highly relevant to the Palestinian context. And this is why, as civil society organization, we insist to make synergy between 1325, CEDAW, Geneva Fourth Convention, and all the UN structures to raise our voice for accountability, to hold Israel accountable to the international humanitarian law. Actually, you know, as Randa said, we developed the NAP, and actually it is a lesson learned from our experience that through using 1325 for advocacy and lobbying, we succeed, you know, to push forward and to pay more attention from the government towards the women, peace and security agenda. And they actually the government adopt our vision, our mission, and they actually adopt all our strategy for advocacy to gain security and peace for the Palestinian women. I think, you know, the creation of nation, and now we have decision, and we are in the process of creation of a national observatory run by the Ministry of Women Affairs. This observatory will enable to systematically collect and analyze information on the situation of Palestinian women and the direct and indirect consequences of the occupation on women. It is vital that civil society organizations and political authorities in Palestine work with existing international mechanism to expose the crimes of the occupation and the specific impact of the conflict on women, not only in public life, but also in the private life. I think, you know, that through these 20 years, there is a lot of lesson learned, there is a lot of, you know, serious concerns, how really, you know, to use or to push forward the political will on the international level as well as in local and regional level to save security, human security, and to you know, reach or achieve a just peace based on on equality, on sovereignty, on respect of the rights of self-determination for Palestinians. I think, you know, this is a very important station to develop our strategy, our paths of change to based on networking, based on mutual understanding, to push forward the security.
Amal,
yeah.
You passed the 2 minutes.
Okay, just one. Actually, you know, there's still questions like the Security Council doesn't, you know, implement its the 1325. We never see any woman in the mission that you know, sent from the council to resolve conflict or ceasefire in different parts of the world. So what I can say that we have to change the logic of international relation that based on power towards the logic of respect of human rights and the power of people and the power and the interest of women and girls in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Can we move to Zahra Langhi? Is Zahra here?
Yes, thank you, Maya. Thank you, Hibaaq. Thank you, Karama. Thank you, dear sisters. Since it's 5 minutes, so I will be trying to wrap up already, Yani.
Can I comment yes. about the beautiful library you have in the background? I could not see commenting.
Thank you.
So I'm sure.
Oh yeah. This is why I commented, Hibaaq. Go ahead, Zahra.
Thank you. So I think, as you, Maya, started, this is an important moment, and hopefully it will be transformative. I think it's Amal who said that we need a shift of paradigm. Many of the colleagues have been saying any important things. So I think if we have to say something in 5 minutes about one pillar, especially my intervention is only on participation in peace processes and mediation, I think it's important not to lose sight of the moment that we are in. And the moment, yes, it's transformative. There are many challenges. But there is an opportunity, a window of opportunity to shift the paradigm. I think 20 years, WPS agenda has failed to live and to its potential. Amal raised, and many others have raised important issues about failing to address occupation, apartheid state. So there is a need to decolonize the WPS agenda. There is a need, and I'm happy today we have us as a network from the South, and also friends who believe in inclusive peace from the North. So I think this is an important moment. I just ran to this meeting and I was attending a meeting, a talk by the former special envoy to Libya, talking about Libya and global disorder. We need to understand the moment that we are in a global disorder. Does that mean that it is the end of multilateralism? Or there is a possibility that we women from the North and South can reimagine multilateralism and international relations based on another kind of peace, not peace that is not even adhered and respected by the powers and the state members of the Security Council. So I think shifting also the agenda from a state building approach and to stressing an agenda that focuses, that is more people-centered. Maya mentioned the climate change, the pandemics. These are things that are on our side to reimagine and reshape the agenda and have the paradigm shift that we want to have. I think, and I'm sure that my friend Mouna from Syria and Amal from Yemen will talk more about the frustrations about how the UN has not walked the talk. And so there is something, it's not about the failure to implement the agenda. There is something wrong in the agenda and we need to address it. And this is the opportunity. So yes, I agree with one of my sisters here today said this is not a moment to celebrate necessarily, but to reflect on the agenda. And that's, and we owe it to our people who say, as Salma was saying, why are you defending and talking about this agenda, Security Council resolutions? What about the other Security Council resolutions that talk about accountability? So we need to have a comprehensive approach, ending the silos, synergizing the agendas, whether it's SDGs, SDGs, or Maya also mentioned the prevention of violent extremism. We have to have a say. And it's all centered around a different kind of peace, and another form of societies that sees peace from a feminist intersectional perspective. So I think these issues are important. I don't want to talk into details. It's not only about the representation of women, it's about the design of the process as a whole, and the agenda. And the agenda needs to be driven by an inclusive peace, decolonial, feminist, inclusive peace perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Zahra, for your excellent intervention.
Maya, Samia ElHashmi has the internet now, so maybe we should go to her.
Yeah.
Samia, اتفضلي.
شكرا جزيلا، يعني سعيدة جدا. I'm so happy having you all in one platform, even if it is virtually. But really, I appreciate the initiative from Karama, as usual, bringing us all together. And I started to recall 1325 before 20 years. Actually, here in Sudan, we didn't recognize it till maybe 10 years only. Before that, it was something coming from the Security Council, and the previous regime was not in good terms with the Security Council. So it was for us even a threat, yani, talking about 1325 before the Arab League adopted and encouraging the Arab country members to develop a national action plan. Yani, I like the presentation of Zahra and others, of course, but she talked about the agenda itself. Actually, the 1325, because it is like framework, every country has to develop a national action plan. But before that, I think we need to have global action plan before having national action plans, because the perspective of peace, we need to be inclusive. And I can give examples for Libya, for Yemen. Unfortunately, yani, we succeeded not to fall in the trap of the revolutions, and the peaceful revolution in December 2018 was proven that if the international community not interfere in a way to to interfere or to interact with the revolutions in a way that make the country or the people of the country form their own governments and their own systems, it could be much better. Yani, if we compare Sudan with the neighboring country who, yani, after the Arab Spring, fall in a chaos, and they are suffering up to now in this chaos. And because I think the matter or the issue of peace, we are not neighboring country to Yemen, but we are part and parcel of what is happening right now in Yemen. So and even in Libya as well, our people has been taken there to fight on behalf of some parties there. I think the global point of view to the peace and engaging women in the process of making this peace, yani, will make it different from what is happening right now. For Sudan now, I just wanted to give, yani, an overview. Actually, in the previous regime, like I said, anything coming from the Security Council was not welcome, and the government was reluctant in developing. We developed a civil society, we developed a national action plan, but there was no political will to adopt it or even to implement it. After the revolution, we managed to have the first national action plan, and we are looking to exchange experiences with the networks in Karama and other networks to implementation. Especially, we just last week finished the peace, concluded the peace agreement with the army groups who are fighting in the previous regime. So now we are looking forward for implementation of national action plan, but I'm insisting on having global action plan as well. Thank you, Maya.
Thank you, and thank you for keeping the time.
Okay.
I'll move now to Mouna Ghanem. Is Mouna connected?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much, my dear Maya. It's very good to see you all here.
A pleasure.
It's my pleasure to be among all these distinguished women and leaders for the Arab region. I think it's as mentioned by my colleague Zahra. We have a lot of international crises now, and health crisis we are suffering now. It's only a manifestation of the political and the global crisis in politics and economy. So we need to watch all these changes all over the world with an eye, with a gender eyes, not to add the woman at the end, but to contribute to the restructuring of the international political system from a gender perspective. We need to create a new system, a new political system, new health system, which is not gender sensitive, but gender made of. So when we talk about Syria, we need also to look at the political challenges in the region, and there is a lot of need to focus on peace, democracy, and gender-sensitive political system, as mentioned. But what is more important when you talk about peace in the region? We need to talk about sustainable peace. It's not only peace for 1 year or 2 years. It's sustainable peace for all the countries in the region who is facing and suffering from the consequences of conflicts. In Syria, all the political process to achieve this peace was linked to the UN-led political process, and the woman issue and the woman agenda was linked to this political process, which all the woman issue was reduced to one institution called the Women Advisory Board, which is linked to the UN Special Envoy. And now nobody is working. The momentum among the Syrian women has been reduced to some meetings on the Zoom during these challenges. So what I'm saying that we need to really separate the woman struggle and the woman issues from only a political process which is linked to the Geneva process, because now there is not very few development, if any, in this agenda. So the woman issue is also, nobody is talking about it, nobody is addressing it, and it's a high time to talk about the woman issue, taking into consideration the political crisis all over the world. My second point is that in order to, I don't like to talk about women on the table. I would like to talk about the women who can open the door and go to the table and sit in the place they like on the table. It's not like we want to be part of the process. We want to make the process. We want to be the leaders. And in the political process in Syria, women, there was a great emphasis on keeping a woman as an activist, not as the political leaders. And this is a golden opportunity for Syria, because now there is a potential to change the system, to restructure a new system in the future. I don't know, in 1 year, or in 5 years, in 10 years, but the potential is there. And this new system or this potential should be made to make the woman take the leadership role. When I talk about leadership, I don't want to keep the role of the woman in leadership to local communities. I want to create a system which allows the woman to be president, to be vice president, to be in the military, to be in the civil society, to be everywhere a woman wants. Yeah, you are smiling because I took this idea from you yesterday. So what we want to do, we want to restructure a political system which not add the woman, which is made by women. I think this is very important for Syria. That's my third point, that Syria, the Syrian political file was the Syrian political file was left to some few countries in the world, among all the key players in Syria. And these key countries who are known by everybody, women issue is not there at the top of their priorities. So, and now the other countries who are interested in supporting women issue, who are interested in supporting 1325, they just withdrawing themselves from the Syrian file, and consequently, the support and the advocacy and the lobbying and the incubation of the women activists is reducing by time. And I think this is a big problem, because we should separate, again, we should separate the woman issue from the political issue in Syria. My last point that during all this struggle for, because all the region is in chaos, and there is a lot of violence, and there is a war and political struggles. Everybody is focusing on 1325, and nobody is mentioning CEDAW. And CEDAW is very important. Yes. And CEDAW is very important because CEDAW is a tool to reconstruct the constitution, which doesn't include any discrimination against women. And there is a need, when we are celebrating 1325, there is a need to twinning it with CEDAW again. We need to talk again about CEDAW. We need to put CEDAW again on the top of our priority, because 1325 doesn't talk about discrimination in economy. And what we want to have a feminist economy in the new system for the region. It's not talking about the rural woman, and we need to have a woman who in the rural area who has all the rights. So we need to twin this too. And second, I think, lastly, finally, I think it's very important. It's very important now to interfere in the Arab region, because it's a moment to make the change, and we want to make a change to make this region enjoy sustainable development and peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mouna, for keeping the time. I would give the floor right now to Lamis, Palestine.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe I will not take that much time, because Amal and Randa, they covered everything about it, but it's only to emphasize on two main issues, to emphasize on the issue that about the role of civil society in Palestine. It's very active and powerful, because it's been activating since before the establishment even of the Palestinian National Authority, and before Oslo occurs. And because of this, it was related more, the role of the civil society, it was related to the resistance of the occupation, to all this struggle with the continued Israeli occupation. And because of this, now the Palestinian civil society, they influence the adoption of the UN Security Council resolution in Palestine. We're now celebrating the launching the second generation even of the NAP, but still, and a lot of documentation reports have been presented even in front of the different international platforms in the UN, in the Human Rights Council in Geneva, in different platforms. We presented the different human rights violations, and we even highlights on the UN reports to be more specifically the UN Commission mission on the issue of the impacts of the Israeli practices against Palestinian civilians during the March of Return in 2018. And even the report that it was presented by the special rapporteur of human rights in OPT in Palestine by Dr. Ling, where these reports, they amount even the violations, and they send alarms that these violations, it amounts war crimes. And because of this, I'm saying about this because it's, I think after 20 years of the UN Security Council, after this, I think the Security Council is to take some decisions or to take some actions towards all these violations that being presented in front of the Security Council. I think there should be building linkages between the Article 11. The focus, it has to be done more on accountability measures, that it has to be taken by the Security Council towards the number of violations according to Article 11 within the UN Security Council resolution. And I believe that it can be linked to the international criminal law, because as far as the UN commissions, they amount the violations as war crimes, so it has to be dealt through the ICC. This is, it has to be, we as women, even at the globe, we need to see some actions that need to be taken by the Security Council towards all these crimes that it's being taken against women at the globe, not only against Palestinians. I want to also to focus on the issue of the role of the civil society organization and how to hold even the PA accountable against some policies, that the lack of policies. But we said dealing with the public policies, with the local policies, it can be dealt through other international conventions, like the protections for Palestinian women, even the representation and political participation about women. It can be dealt through other international conventions and human rights conventions. Our focus in Palestine is how to utilize all these the three pillars that you mentioned earlier, Dr. Maya, and even the accountability. It has to be dealt through the continued violations that it has been related to the continued of the Israeli occupation over Palestine, and the continued of the criminal acts against Palestinians, and especially against Palestinian women.
Thank you very much, Lamis. Thank you for the intervention. I would move right now to Amal Bahsa.
Hello, everybody. Masa al khair. I'm really, I don't know what to say after all of this beautiful intervention made by my colleagues and my sisters about 1325 and how it has failed us as women movement, especially in countries that are undergoing conflicts, wars, and violence, and all of this, ordeal that women has to deal with. As far as for Yemen, well, we have different experiences in dealing with the 1325. During the revolution, when the political leadership were weak, I mean, be it the ruling party or the opposition, they were both weak, and we were strong, the people, women in the streets and the youth, and we were able to influence the UN, where they were not having any idea about 1325 until 2012. So when the UN appointed the first UN envoy, and when we by chance knew about his existence, we met him and we asked, okay, why don't you meet women? Then he reluctantly accepted to meet us, and then we arranged a meeting for 30 women. Later on, he discovered that there is 1325, and he is obliged also to consult women. So he kept consulting us, and that led to representation of women in the national dialogue by 30%. That is one bright things about women, peace and security, because we use this and we threatened the UN resident coordinator and the envoy that we are going to complain to the Security Council that you are not honoring the political, the resolution of the Security Council. After that, okay, we have the dialogue, and we had up till now, like 3-4 governments, we were successful in putting this quota and women's participation in politics, whether in appointed or elected authorities, by 30% as a minimum at a minimum rate. Up till now, we haven't even been able to reach 1% throughout all of these appointments of governments or advisors or governors, and women still, they are kept aside, and whenever said, okay, we have agreed on at least women's participation by 30%, they said, no, it is not now, it is after we do the election and we are having a new president or parliament, although there was no deadline or there is no time frame when to apply the outcomes of the national dialogue. That was the outcome of a national consensus of all political parties and social forces. That was one issue. At the level of the UN, we are having currently a UN envoy who is either, I'm sorry to say, naive about 1325, or he is not that powerful to enforce women's presence at the table. Up till now, we are having like 5 or 6 rounds of peace talks in Geneva, Pale, Kuwait, and last week or 2 weeks ago, there was a talk between the two parties to the conflicts. Not a single woman was there. They were discussing and negotiating about how to release prisoners. No women were there, and even the Women Technical Authority, that's supposed to be, the women's arm or the women's reflecting women issues in his office. They are unreachable. We cannot reach them. Even when reach them, they don't speak, they don't talk. We don't know. Okay, we don't know what is going on. So we need to change this WPS paradigm, or we need to talk about alternative. If we talk also about the protection and accountability, it is the members of the Security Council who issued this resolution. They are failing us. They are fueling the war in Yemen by arms trades. They don't honor this arms trades international convention, and people are dying on a daily basis because Yemen has become a market for their weapons, and it is more of economic interest rather than honoring international humanitarian and human rights law. Thank you.
Thank you, Amal, for keeping the time. I'll move right now to the Arab region from an international perspective, and I will start with Her Excellency Ambassador Charlotta Sparre. My dear friend, the floor is yours.
Sorry. Thank you very, very much, Maya, and thank you, Hibaaq, for inviting me to this. I feel extremely honored to take part and to see you and to speak and meet with all these absolutely amazing and impressive women. I'm very humbled to speak after you, but luckily I've got a slightly different question in looking at what Sweden has been doing for the MENA region. But I will actually start maybe at a global level, and where the Swedish feminist foreign policy was launched a number of years ago, and putting a very strong stress both domestically and internationally on rights, representation, resources, but also based on the reality that women are living in. Several of you have been talking about the importance of walking the talk, and that is something that we try to do during our time in the UN Security Council 2017 to 18, and where we really consistently were insisting on bringing in the women, peace and security agenda into the work of the Council. During our time there, we looked at all of the mandates for the peacekeeping and political missions, made sure that there was a reference to the women, peace and security agenda, also at looking into the existing mission mandates from before that and making sure that they were strengthened. We also made sure to include more civil society briefers than before in the councils. And during our presidency of the council in July 2018, it was the first time ever that there was a gender parity among the briefers in the Security Council. This shows that it is possible to make a difference, but it takes a political will and a push to do so. Other things that we are doing on a more global level is that we, like many others, created mediation network. The Swedish network is part of the Nordic network, and it aims at not least supporting women in conflict countries. At a global level, we are also giving quite a significant funding support to civil society organizations, including through Swedish organizations such as the Kvinna to Kvinna Foundation that many of you may be familiar with. And I will post a link, by the way, to a recent interesting report that they have published. So when looking in and zooming in a little bit more at the MENA region, first of all, at the political level, we're making sure to constantly integrate the not only the women, peace and security, but also gender equality in all our political dialogues, bilaterally and multilaterally, with the countries in the MENA region, as well as with the EU, UN, and other multilateral fora. Sweden is now taking over the presidency of the European Organization for Security, OSCE, and women, peace and security is one of the top priorities for our work there. And a couple of months ago, we were chairing the Mediterranean dialogue that OSCE has, and I was very happy to then speak in that panel together with Salma Al-Nims. And Zahra Langhi was also there. So there was a fantastic representation from this very group. We were also ahead of the last Syria conference in Brussels, arranging a meeting with Syrian women's organizations and peace builders who were then listened to and engaging with the Swedish foreign minister, as well as the Secretary General of the European External Action Service and the UN Special Envoy. We had a similar meeting with Yemeni women organizations and peace builders, also with our foreign ministers and with UN representatives. The mediation network has engaged in quite a number of different activities. We also have the Folke Bernadotte Academy, the Agency for Peace and Security, doing a lot of work, including a program on promoting women's meaningful participation in Palestine, a program that I'm engaged in myself. And the organization that I am heading on the Swedish Dialogue Institute, they're the Women, Peace and Security agenda, is and will be one of our key elements, and we hope very much to work with Karama and others. So just a couple of reflections on what is it then that we have learned and listening to all of you. Well, first of all, I think it's absolutely key to connecting the local and the global. Also connecting the tracks. We need to look much more at a multi-track approach than maybe we have done before, and not least draw on the phenomenal experiences that are at a grassroots level. Skills development is something that has been talked about by several of you, but I think it's as much a question of also getting experiences and exposures. Building alliances is obviously absolutely key. And then the intergenerational dimension is something that I also think we need to look at. Last but not least is that I think we really need to look at how can we make sure that women's inclusion is at the core and at the starting point of all of this work, and that it does not only become an add-on or a tick on the box, but that this really is at the core of peace building. But for that, we will need the paradigm shift that many of you have been talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotta, for your excellent presentation as well. I'll move right now to Lieutenant General Robert Wood.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Hibaaq. Thank you, Maya, for having me on this absolutely distinguished panel. 20 years before 1325 came into being, I was patrolling in the high north in the Arctic in the cold, and for the first time experienced the power of a woman leader. She was literally putting up a tent in the harsh snow conditions and leaving the males behind that couldn't complete the mission. And then she took the strongest men and completed the mission, picked up the ones that couldn't on her way back, and came back to base. Now, this was 20 years before 1325. At the time of 1325 coming into being, I was in charge of a unit in the Balkans. And we found ourselves actually having to protect a group of women who was the victims of trafficking during the upheavals in the Balkans. And then on to today and all the tragedies we have seen in the Middle East. I would simply, to begin with, make the argument that when 1325 acknowledges the different impacts conflict has on different genders, it is valid today, and it has been valid for many, many years, and not that much has changed. When it stresses the importance of active participation by women, everywhere I've been in the Middle East, in the Balkans, in Sudan, in Afghanistan, it stresses that this is a key point that has a significant positive impact on the processes. When it also acknowledges sexual violence in conflict as a huge protection concern, unfortunately, we see that that is happening today as well. It brings me, when I link 20 years before, at the time when it came into being, and 20 years after, to make the argument that to be pushing 1325 is the resolution and the agenda that can have a positive impact on all the other resolutions and all the other agendas. So it can be driving, synergizing if you want. It can be driving, I don't think it's too much to say it can actually be driving system change if we have a powerful implementation. When it comes to the Norwegian Red Cross, I'm, by the way, happy to say that I completed my time as president a few days ago. What could be better than starting to be former president and then taking part in a reflection of 1325? Our approach is to connect with national partners in gender-specific activities, as simple as private rooms for women that are used in their monthly, that time of the month, instead of going into the bushes where they are becoming prey for someone who is looking for that kind of activities. So very specific gender activities in the field. Another experience is that when we go through the matriarchs, when in a crisis situation, when we go through the matriarchs, we find that it benefits all. And you all know, we know from research, when you go through the patriarchs, it has a tendency to benefit males and not the whole society. In the fight against sexual violence and promoting 1325, I'm a bit proud to say that in my country we have, with the Norcross, been able to have access, been actually invited by the military units who are currently serving in the Middle East in a couple of operations, and challenging them on the implementation on 1325 and international humanitarian law. With all of them, not only a key leader, but with all of them in a big hall where they are being challenged and there are discussions and reflections. To engage like that is key for 1325. Now, what then 20 years after? A resolution is a good beginning, but it's definitely not an end. National action plans are key to the effort when we look ahead, even if not that much has changed on the ground. Of course, the engagement by the African Union and the League of Arab States is key in this endeavor. Finish with a personal point of view, if I may. I'm proud to say that through a top-down approach in my country, led from the Prime Minister down, we were able to send a female Major General to the Middle East in charge of the oldest UN mission as a chief observer, Major General Lund. I'm also proud to say that during our period with UNSMIS, we had more than 50% representation in the leadership team by women. I'm also proud to say that we have a special forces unit in my country made up of women only, and it's not a parade unit. It's one that jumps out of airplanes into the Arctic cold and actually do exactly what the males do. From the Red Cross perspective, what I brought with me is that when you go through the women, it benefits all, and we need the specific project, as I said. Now, to conclude, I would like to emphasize the top-down responsibility. Secondly, the training of soldiers. And third, I had a discussion with more than 20 force commanders a few years ago, and we agreed, although we didn't put it into writing, that we need to be able to hold the commanding officers responsible for IHL, International Humanitarian Law. It's not enough to punish soldiers. You need to hold the commanding officers responsible when it comes to SVGP. That is a key to move forward. And fourthly, maybe if I may be so bold, I'm kind of surprised and puzzled that there's not what I would label ambassadors for this cause. Being a mobile team in different regions and different states. And with ambassadors, I could easily see some retired generals. I believe when a retired general comes into the room and speaks the language of a soldier, it makes a huge difference. So to have that kind of ambassadors, to have ambassadors that are very visible from, let's say, the cultural part of the dimensions we see today could be another way to think. So thank you again for having me. Congratulations on your efforts, and it's been a pleasure to listen and learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant General Robert, for your intervention. I'll move right now to Dr. Toni. Is Dr. Toni connect? Yes. Go ahead, Toni.
Hello, good evening, everyone. And I'm going to be very quick because I'm quite excited about the discussion and the Q&A session. So I thought what I would just do is go through some of the overlaps that I found in a lot of the interventions that have already been made, and to think through where we're at now, some of our frustrations, highlighting some of those, and then to look through the future. One of the things I found quite useful is that actually all of the interventions have tended to do that. So clearly, we're now 20 years into 1325, as well as the Women, Peace and Security Agenda. I think it is useful to remember that first resolution, but to also remember that we've had many more since then. And of course, I think that a lot of the criticisms of the agenda, but also the aspirations that we had in 2000 are entirely valid. But I think my more optimistic self would say, well, actually, even if we're not where we want to be, it is an achievement to be able to gather a group of women transnationally located in a space wanting to transform this agenda. So I just want to say, I think that in of itself is an achievement. The fact that, we might not have the voice that we want to have, but we are plenty and we're not going anywhere. So I think that 20 years in the making, that should definitely be acknowledged. Now, beyond this, I think one of the themes that have been coming through in a lot of the specific national contexts, but also the transnational context, is the frustration that the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, although it has provided a space to have conversations about what gender equality means, but and indeed the role of women, the perspectives of women, particularly in conflict, it hasn't necessarily provided the space for the sort of agency that we would expect. Part of this comes from the lack of integration of intersecting concerns. So we've mentioned issues, for example, around climate change. We've mentioned the current pandemic, which is clearly transnational, but it's not necessarily integrated into the practices of women, peace, and security until recently. But also importantly, with the example of Palestine, for example, the fact that although we happily talk about WPS, there are specific reflections and actual action around the integration of the impact of the occupation on women and women, peace, and security issues. So I don't think that we can divorce this entirely, because the largest implication it's had is around the issue of accountability. How can we hold those in power accountable for the implementation of women, peace, and security, of the women, peace, and security agenda? So one of the things that I found quite interesting about the WPS is, at least part of my frustration is, a lot of times WPS is understood simply as specific programs of WPS, because there isn't a systematic inclusion, a commitment to transformation, and sort of, again, that expression of how do intersectional oppressions actually affect women's lives. So I think sort of thinking through, where do we go from here? Certainly, I think the biggest theme of this is that we need transformation, we need accountability. How do we get transformation and how do we get accountability? Those in power have to give the space for that to happen. I think that it's not enough to simply say, in the context of the EU, we talk about local ownership all of the time. In other contexts, we sort of say, the locals should be involved. But what does that actually mean when, in the end, the priorities of the women, peace, and security agenda are dictated by those who have power? But I also want to, again, emphasize that optimistic note that, we might not be in the sort of specific positions that we want to be, but there is power in the sort of gathering that is happening today, that we can come together without having planned it before and actually see that we do have overlapping perspectives, that we are able to clearly also have allies around the world who are willing to listen. So I think sort of thinking through, I don't want to have another meeting in the next, in 20 years where, we talk about some achievements, but we're still not there. In fact, I don't think we should be talking about what happens in the next 2 decades. I think we should really be thinking, what is someone mentioned earlier, a global action plan for WPS in the next 18 months. COVID is not going away. Not only is COVID not going away tomorrow, the implications that COVID has had is not going away. We are currently in a moment of crisis. In Europe, we are still recovering from the 2008 crisis, and that is global in of itself. But the pandemic has shown us clearly that there's a lot more that binds us together, and we cannot keep working as if the only people whose interests matter are those countries of the global north and the powerful countries. So to create accountability, we need to also, take the space. At this point, we need to take the space. The only way to do that for me has to be through a specific feminist ethos that is convinced about and demands justice, much more so than equality. That justice has to be integral to how the WPS goes forward. And this justice can only come from, understanding and designing national action plans, regional action plans from the perspective of the most marginalized, whether that's refugees, whether there's people who are in occupied territories, or whether that is other gender and sexual minorities. So going forward, I think, again, we do seem to have, thank you, Maya, we do seem to have the allies here, but I would say, we should be working through a concerted effort that moves the women, peace, and security agenda away from just programs and thinking through how we can systematically build WPS to basically all of the other international commitments and to sort of challenge. I think Zahra mentioned earlier, we need a decolonial mindset here. We need to also be thinking through how do we challenge the current power structures, because WPS, unfortunately, despite its emancipatory potential, has not been immune from the nature of the power structures within the international system. And this is precisely the time. We can no longer wait. I think 2 decades is long enough. You know, we had the global summit. This is the time that we need to think about the power structures and how WPSA fits into that. Thank you.
Thank you, dear. I'm seeing Hibaaq asking for 3 minutes for Amani. Is Amani here?
Amani should be here. She's an incredibly young woman, so we don't want to be accused that we didn't talk to the youth, even though you and I are still, of course, young, you know.
I was about to accuse you, Hibaaq, but anyhow.
Yeah, Zahra Langhi, anyone who's younger than me is youth. Okay, okay, we can continue. Amani is not, yes, she's here. Amani, yeah. Since you are younger, you will only have 2 minutes. Go ahead. Amani? Okay. Amani, Phil, is Amani? I see her here. Okay, so we continue and she will join us when she does.
Okay, so I will move right now to Phil for the questions.
I think Nina is going to ask a question. I'll just put.
Okay. Great. We have been telling people. Okay, where's Nina? Okay, Nina.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to start by saying that, you know, after 33 years at the UN and the last 2 weeks participating in a lot of Zoom discussions, I sincerely say that this has been the most frank and strategic discussion I've heard. Also very focused on digging beneath the rhetoric and the proclamations and asking, what do you need to do to actually get the funding, the attention, the involvement in the agenda? And I'm not trying to do a plug on my article, but in an article I've just published, I put in the link. I have ended that article with a 3-point, I put myself out on the line to the Secretary General to take a 3-pronged action for global implementation, starting with the appointment of a eminent independent person to do a global action plan, looking at the 10, because we had 1325 and 9 subsequent resolutions over the 20 years. This is all in my article. For that eminent expert to liaise with regional groups, civil society, member states, and to hammer out priorities and an action plan. That's 1. And 2 is to put a transparent accountability mechanism on a website so that everyone can see the progress on those priorities and the timelines, so that there's accountability and transparency. I think what we've seen is that the Secretary General, I'm a fan of the UN, but I think I'm a critic as well. There's a lot of focus on gender parity in his top level appointments and women mediators, etc. But the question I ask is, let's look on the ground. What is all of this action doing to improve the lives of the women on the ground and meet their needs? It's a very inward looking discussion at what the UN has done among its own staff and not an outward discussion. And I think that in this, I suggest the eminent person and an independent expert advisory group, because as long as we continue to go piecemeal like this and not track progress and dissect the requests of the Security Council in 10 resolutions, and we forget that in 2015 there was a 400-page global study on the implementation of Resolution 1325, identifying gaps with 196 recommendations based on consultations around the world for a year. So I ask that that action plan cover all the unmet requests of the Security Council coupled with the unimplemented recommendations of the global study. And I The general who I had the pleasure to meet was when I was on the Gaza Board of Inquiry. I agree with his comments very much, and I think men have to be a very big part of this discussion, but men who have operational knowledge of the field and the how-to. I think this operational lens, speaking the language, is really important. So I'm saying this because I really would like you to look at those that three-pronged action. It's been well received by a lot of member states, but whether they will pressure the Secretary General to now systematizing implementation. We need a reckoning. What has not been implemented? What should be implemented, taking account of regional priorities, et cetera. Such an action plan can have different segments for different regions. So I think until we do this systematic action plan and a transparency and accountability mechanism, which is one of my proposals, we will not get any better progress over the next decade than we have the piecemeal progress and insufficient progress over the last 20 years. If they can do it for climate change, and they can do it for hunger, which are really global needs, they can finally do a systematic approach for women. So this is my and I think, you know, I really mean it, the discussion that I've just heard and the frankness, you talked about being excluded or the superficial engagement of women on the Yemen issue or on the Syria issue. The Secretary General needs to hear these voices. So I would throw out that, well, I want you to look at my three-pronged action plan. I'll send, if I had your emails, I'd send you the article. I think you should also, my modest opinion, given that your voices are so compelling, is that you should put together a letter to the Secretary General signed by all of you with some common appeals. I think it would be very powerful because you cover ranges of the region. You represent civil society. You're very, distinguished women with men, the signatures if appropriate. And I think you need to send it to him. I think it's good for him to hear it, because you can have this webinar among yourselves and with the great support of, I work closely with Sweden and Finland and all of these, but he needs to hear that people aren't happy and that it's insufficient, that it's piecemeal, and that we need a more systematized implementation plan with accountability and transparency for the way ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, dear. Phil, will
Amani, yes, it's ready now. Thank you so much, Nina.
Thank you, Nina.
I want to send you, if you send on the chat your email, I'll send it to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Karama, and thank you for all of the speakers. It has been a great speeches, of course. And based on what has been presented, we all come to a conclusion to realize that there is still much that needed to be done. We still have a long way to achieve, to promote and to achieve equal participation, and to highlight the role of women in building peace, and to also to achieve peace for women. But I also wanted to highlight something related to young women, and to have a youth perspective in the Women, Peace and Security agenda. First of all, I just wanted to highlight that in July 2020, the UN Security Council adopted the new version of the Youth, Peace and Security resolution that also highlights and promotes synergies between the Women, Peace and Security and Youth and Peace and Security resolutions, which also emphasize on the importance of highlighting the intersectionalities between gender and age. As we all know that young women are being definitely by conflict and occupation, due also to the patriarchal structures and social norms, and because also we know that occupying power and perpetrators, they know well how this affects young women, and how families and communities are being stigmatized by young women, unfortunately. So it's really important to initiate dialogue. It's really important to initiate an intergenerational dialogue, to join forces between the wider generation and younger generation of women, to build the momentum and to allow the two generations to share experiences and to gain more energies and to gain more power, and also to maximize this experience. A lot of work has been done by civil society organizations, of course, and this is apparent, and we can all tell from your presentations, from your work on ground. But we need to take this agenda forward. We need to have achievement on ground, not only by civil society organizations, not only by non-state actors, but also by state actors, to take an effective measures to, as mentioned by the speakers, to have this reflected in the budget, in the participation of young women and women. So yes, few days ago, there was a video that was published by a civil society organization, for example, in Palestine, that highlights that 0% of young women has been participating in reconciliation, in peace building, in even participating in the government level, not only on the state level. So we need to take into consideration that peace cannot be achieved without the participation of women, and especially young women, because these are the future leaders as well. And this also takes more support from women leaders from all sectors, especially from the civil society, because it also unlocks the potential of these women, the future leaders.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hibaaq, how would you like to go ahead with this? Would you, sorry, my computer stopped. Hibaaq, how, because of the delay, what do you want to do?
Well, I mean, we have still 10 more minutes before you go, Maya, and I will always take my order from governments, you know, so whatever you want. I'm just an NGO, what can I say? So
La,
Maya,
la, 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 la. I cannot say this. No, I just have a meeting that is planned at 6 with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So if you allow me that, I would wrap what has been said, then you can take the questions further and you close. What you take my role after?
I think we're all fine. There aren't really particular questions right at this moment. So please do wrap up, and okay. I will close everyone.
I'm really very thrilled, as Nina said, with all the comments, taking it from the side of the government and hearing the civil society talking about it, and especially civil society that are really in countries with conflict, not the countries that have an outward looking, or countries that would serve other countries in the peace and security agenda, but the women who are really participating. I think from the first moment I heard the word resources may be repeated in 4 of the interventions. One of the main challenges is resources, and I think this has to be one of the things that we should focus on. Lack of monitoring and evaluation, let me say lack of implementation results clear or reporting, and then M&E is missing. It should be an action plan, not a strategy. And I like this, what Salma had said it. We should not go in big. We have to be very specific, to be also with KPIs and core measurements. I also like when it was said we need to celebrate. Yes, there are a lot of difficulties. There is a lot of changes in the whole world. 20 years back, when we were drafting the resolution 1325, our region had the Palestinian challenge, or the Palestinian problem, or the conflict. It was on only one country. Right now, how many countries are safe? a lot of dynamics has been changed. A lot of dynamics has been changed. And we need to celebrate, but we really need to celebrate our resilience as well. Going through all of this and going through the challenging time that our region is passing through is extremely important. It's heartbreaking for me to hear the second generation of 1325. This means that we're going to enter into the third generation and the fourth generation, and we're going to keep on running. It's better to see whether we are really where we have the lessons learned, where we have challenges, and having this second generation. Right now, government, I will switch. When I was on the side of the UN and when I was on the side of the civil society, there is a lot of talk and there are a lot of words that are nice, easy to be said rather than implemented. If you switch, it's totally different. When you say to the whole world right now, we need a new generation of National Security Council, just remember when they approved the Security Council resolution, how much talk and how much negotiation was on the state level. It's not as easy as it is said. Accountability framework have been mentioned most in all of our interventions mostly, and a need of paradigm shift was also mentioned. The localization is not taking place. I just challenge this wording because localization actually is taking place. It's the resources that is not taking place. Localization 20 years back, people did not know what's 1325. When we're talking about 1325 right now with the media, some people know. So localization is happening, but maybe there is a lack of funds for certain civil society. Maybe there is a lack of management of the funds, but it is not localization as per se. Human security issue was said as well or mentioned. I like very much the transformative agenda. The agenda did not fail, but we have to think of a transformative agenda. National Observatory has been mentioned as well. I tend to have a long discussion with Zahra when she said state building approach versus person building approach. I would tell you, Zahra, they have to be intertwined. No single approach will succeed. It has to be both together. If we build a beautiful state and the citizen is not satisfied, you don't have a country. If you have a person building approach with no state, there is no country as well. It has to go hand in hand together. Accountability again. And accountability was intertwined also with commitment and transformation. It should be there. CEDAW, I love very much the mentioning of CEDAW. We have to remember CEDAW. We have to remember that this is the convention that we have in our hands. It's not a resolution. It's the convention that all states are reporting on. So it should be coming up in our frequent discussion more. Alliances building an intergenerational dimension is very much important, and I think it's very important for every one of us to ask one question: how many young leaders we have took on our shoulders to mentor in the past 20 years, and how many we are committed to work on in the coming 5 years? As the network here, I'm not talking right now about anyone, but we have to be responsible. We have to have accountability on our shoulders, and we have to respond to the intergenerational dialogue. The problem is that we are seen from the youth side that we are out of fashion. It's not intergenerational dialogue anymore. We are out of fashion. We are talking about things that they don't feel that it's existing. So it's very important that as women leaders, as women in decision making, as women in civil society, building on our shoulder, taking on our shoulder, mentoring other younger generation is a must. But please question yourself first. How many young leaders you have built their capacity in the past 20 years? This is the first question to ourselves, and then the question to the future. I loved also the quote, resolution is a beginning, not an end. Coming to this, I think I will tell you my suggestions for the way forward, and I will leave it for you, Hibaaq, and my friends here. I think the way forward should have a cultivation of political, social, male support. This three pyramid has to go hand in hand. Financial support for women's inclusion is a must. Donors must devote adequate financial assistance towards the regional initiatives, conflict prevention, mediation, and negotiation. And I will add another word, mentorship. Mentorship is a salvation for us now. Shed more light on real women, influential female leaders. You are real influential female leaders. And I usually say shed lights on leaders, but why I added the word real? I had a statement 3 or 4 days ago, and we used to hear about 2 women leaders in the 1952 revolution, in the 1967 war, and the 1973 war. More women were added. But when I was doing a research on the real women leaders on the ground, that no one had mentioned their names before, no one had put their names in a statement, neither official nor unofficial. I think these are the real women that you have to shed light on, Hibaaq. And I think this should be your project for the coming year, to document women leaders in the region. Media involvement is extremely important, and these real women models should be coming in the light of the media. And as one of my colleagues said also, we should not be the cherry on the top or the last minute call. We have to be in the process. And in the process, when we worked on the COVID-19 in Egypt, it's very important that we should be proactive. Putting a policy note is important, but asking to be in the crisis management meetings is more important. And of course, this needs a political will, but also needs some push from our side. Last but not least, investing in young women leaders will pay off in the future, and technology innovation is extremely important for the new generation. It's very hard for me right now to use Zoom. They are doing more things on the technology. So please try to use younger women leaders and work on a mentorship program, Hibaaq. Thank you very much.
Great moderator. Thank you so much indeed. I want to thank every and each one of you. 3 things that are very important. The word decolonizing, intersectionality, reassessing 20 years after 1325 is very important. Adjusting, because the world has completely changed, we need to adjust it. We are not the same, mentally or physically or economically, or politically or socially or religiously the way we were 20 years ago. We are in hell. So we need to reassess. We cannot continue and implement and still lobby. So I think maybe there is, it's, what is it? I forgot the English word, but it was something in disguise. Pleasant in disguise or whatever it was. But the point is the fact that many countries did not adopt national action plans. Maybe it's an opportunity to to look at it and assess it and make sure that we are adjusting it to our reality, which is totally different 20 years ago. So reassessing is extremely, or transformational, or whatever, English word is. We need to think about that. And I think as a community of Karama, we have to continue this discussion. I cannot, we looked at it from the military, from the political and diplomatic, and from the academic, and from the activism. So I think we have to have another meeting that we brainstorm and follow up the outcomes of this meeting today. I thank all the wonderful people who are not on the screen, the incredible panelists, the incredible, what can I say, Maya. I absolutely, Charlotte, thank you so much. You have always been one of us. I'm so happy you are here. Amal, Layla, Toni, Lamis, Amal, and Randa. Nina, you should have been on this panel. Amani, my wonderful, young, incredible rock star. Samia ElHashmi, she is still on. You know, congratulations, the internet is working in Khartoum. Phil, who is the rock of Karama, for really putting this together. Amina Helou, who absolutely without her, none of this would have ever happened. And all my colleagues, you know, Victoria and everybody else. Amal, thank you so much. Randa, thank you so much. Suzan Aref, Zahra Langhi, you know, and everybody else who is not here. So thank you so much, but let's continue and see where else we can take. But the name of the game is, we need to reassess. We need to look at 1325. We need to adjust. And that's, I think, decolonizing is very important, because there is always that complaint of it being more of a north than a south. So this is also another area that we can really look at our incredible alliance and all over the place. So thank you so much. Thank you, Maya.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.